Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the No Name Cinema Society, the film review show that dares to dig a little bit deeper. It is Monday, January 6, 2020, and this is our freeform segment where we don't necessarily review specific films. We just talk about movies in general, the industry, and so forth and so on, and we call it the Society Sound Off. Hi, everybody. My name is Jonathan Betzler. I'm one of your hosts here for this evening. I am back in New York. I was in LA for the last show, back to New York. For now, I'm back to LA in a week or so. And you might have recognized I'm in Astoria, my main place that I stay in New York. You might recognize the cat photo that's been on the portrait that's been on a number of episodes. Okay, so this is our freeform segment, and you're excited to see who is going to be with me for tonight's episode. One of my partners from the 1988 review, Alex Evans, is back, ladies and gentlemen.
Hello.
Ooh, our podcast listeners didn't get to see that luxurious opening, but I did, and our YouTube friends did, and hope they felt it was special as I did. And also with us for his first sound off, the newest member of the No Name Cinema Society, the Zach Attack is here, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, he also has jazz hands.
I have the spirit fingers. He has the jazz hands.
Yeah, it's true. Yes. All right.
Our
So that is our triumvirate here, as you can see, for this first episode. And let me go straight into the schedule. What has been scheduled for this, our 59th series of episodes. It started on Thursday, December 26th, with a review of Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker. And continue with our Indie Spotlight on Monday, December 30th, with the film Downloading Nancy from 2009. And this past Thursday, January 2nd, was a review of the Billy Wilder film Double Indemnity, which inspired tonight's top 5, which you'll see shortly. And tonight, of course, is Sound Off, and there you see some of the things that we're going to be talking about tonight. I know that, Zach, you're drinking with me tonight.
Oh, yeah. When am I not drinking with you?
That's what I like to hear. What do you got?
Stella. It's what we had in the fridge.
Alex, what do you got?
I'm drinking Pilsner Urquell, the national beer of Czech Republic from deep within the former Soviet Union.
I like that beer. I'm a little jealous. I have what's in the fridge here. It was just left over. I don't know if I can have it or not, but I got Modelo. Rather than go shopping for something, I'm just stealing one of theirs. So cheers, guys.
Hey.
Ready to
cheers.
Sound off. Alex might be the only person that likes the next segment that we try to do on every sound off. Alex, do you know what's coming up?
The context for the year?
Nope. It's time for This Day in History, ladies and gentlemen. And on this date, January 6th, in 1929, Mother Teresa arrives in Calcutta to begin her decades of work there with the poor. Also on this day, on January 6th, in 1994, ice skater Nancy Kerrigan is attacked ringside by the bodyguard of her rival Tonya Harding, as depicted in the 2017 Oscar-winning film I, Tonya, which was Devon's #2 film of that year. And on this day in No Name Cinema Society history, on January 6, 2016, we were already on to our 22nd set of episodes, ending our very first season, the way tonight's episode ends our 5th season. Back then, we released all the episodes in one epic night, and it started with a review of the current feature Joy, starring Jennifer Lawrence, and then the film I'm Still Here, the Indie Spotlight, starring Joaquin Phoenix. And then the classic was William Wyler's Roman Holiday from 1953. And then my top 5 that night was the top 5 films written by Dalton Trumbo, inspired by the Roman Holiday review. So birthdays today on January 6th. Eddie Redmayne turns 38 today, born in 1982. He won his Oscar as Best Actor in 2014 for The Theory of Everything, which I correctly predicted in our very first episode, which was an Oscar preview that aired in February 2015. All right, guys, that is This Day in History. Anybody have any thoughts, comments on any of those things? We had Nancy Kerrigan, Mother Teresa, the No Name Cinema Society.
I just saw I, Tonya a few months ago, so that's pretty interesting.
All right, yeah.
Movie.
26 years ago now. Alex, you're the history expert. You got anything on anything I said?
It was in 1987. It was just 10 days before the greatest day in human history.
January 6th.
The day that I and Dan Milo were born.
The day you were born?
Yes.
All right. Greatest day. We're going to remember that one here at the No Name Cinema Society. All right, guys, that's This Day in History. Was that super fun?
Exhilarating.
It's okay. All right, cool. All right, so a tradition on the final broadcast of the regular season. Of course, we've got our big finale episodes coming up. Is I always announce the films that are going to be part of my Oscar movie marathon. I've been doing it every year since 1998, I think it was. So it's been going on a long time. Every year that we've been doing the show, I announce what the 5 films are that the Oscar movie marathon is always the day before the Oscars. So it'll affect Alex a lot, and maybe Zach if he decides to join us for the Oscars this year. He'll be in San Francisco at the time.
Yeah.
So we're looking at February 8th, 2019. Get your pencils ready, everybody. So here's the lineup for this year's Oscar movie marathon. First at 7 a.m. Pacific time, we're going to start with The Theory of Everything, a film from 2014, 5 years ago, featuring the aforementioned birthday boy, Eddie Redmayne, who won the Best Actor Oscar that year. And at 10 a.m. will be the film The Watchmen from 2009 from director Zack Snyder, the film from 10 years ago featuring the performance I named as Best Supporting Actor of 2009, Jackie Earle Haley as Rorschach. And at 2 p.m., the film will be The Last Seduction from 1994, 25 years ago, from director John Dahl, winner of Best Actress at the Indie Spirit Awards for Linda Fiorentino. And at 5 p.m. Pacific time, we'll be screening the film Z from 1969, 50 years ago, from director Costa Gavras. It's the second foreign language film to be nominated for Best Picture and the first in a field of just 5 nominees. And closing things out at 8 p.m. Pacific time with National Velvet from 1944, 75 years ago this year, from director Clarence Brown. It was the Oscar winner for Best Supporting Actress for Anne Revere, and it came up on this show in episode 51.4, in which I counted down the 5 greatest child performances of all time, and that was referring to Elizabeth Taylor's work in the film, in which she was only 12 years old when she appeared in that film. Ladies and gentlemen, and Alex, especially you, that's the lineup. Are you guys excited for the Oscar Movie Marathon this year? Alex, you've attended a lot in the past.
Yeah, I'll try to make it to 2 or 3 of them, probably.
Nice. You're not going to try and do all 5? It's been done a couple times in the past.
No, I'm not that kind of girl.
Zach, you want to drive down from San Francisco to join us?
Yeah, if you're going to pay for beer, I'll sit through the whole thing. Sounds tight.
I mean, I don't know if we're going to start beer at 7, but people usually bring beer, usually from like 2 or 5 o'clock.
It's a long day.
It's a long day, but it's like my favorite day of the year.
Cool.
So that's the announcement. Are you guys ready to move on to the next segment?
Yeah.
All right. See some enthusiasm. This is a newish segment, and ladies and gentlemen, it is our book review. And it's the second time we've done this. Instead of just reviewing movies on the Cinema Society, we thought it'd be fun if one of us occasionally reviews books about movies or movie history. Last time I reviewed a book about the making of Pride of the Yankees, a film that was heavily featured in our 1942 in review. Today's book also has a little something to do with our 1942 in review. It's an autobiography from the actress that I named as Best Actress of 1942 in the film that I said was also the best of that year. The film was the major and the minor, and fans of this show know that the actress is also my favorite actress of all time. Ladies and gentlemen, talking about Miss Ginger Rogers. And here is her autobiography named Ginger, My Story. And that's what I'm reviewing here tonight. I was so excited to read this book. What I'd heard about Ginger's life made me think it was worth a movie script. I looked for something that wasn't necessarily an autobiography, but there's actually not much out there on Ginger. This book offers both what I like and what I don't like about autobiographies. It's not well written in the traditional sense, but sometimes that's a relief. The lack of austerity in the book made it feel a little more conversational, like it actually was Ginger's voice as opposed to some ghostwriter. On the downside, as with most autobiographies, the perspective is very narrow and rose-colored. She lionizes her very controversial and feared mother, Layla, who was infamous in Hollywood then and now. She managed and controlled Ginger for many years, and this book suggests Ginger wouldn't have it any other way. She addresses occasional times when she disobeyed her mother, but legend suggests this relationship was a lot more fraught with drama than this book suggests. Any insight I hoped to gain about her work, acting choices, role choices were not to be found. Most of her on-set stories had to do with what she was wearing or many of the good-natured pranks she seemed to play on co-stars and colleagues that she was very proud of. Finally, and most disappointingly, as much as I appreciated that the fact that this book felt like it was Ginger's voice, I found myself more and more feeling that I didn't like that voice, that Ginger and I, in spite of my lifelong crush, wouldn't get along at all. She was a devout Christian Scientist, and she would take frequent sidetracks in the book to preach a little bit, lecture about drinking and sexuality and the pitfalls thereof. She apparently divorced at least 2 of her husbands because of drinking, not alcoholism, just drinking in general. She was a pure teetotaler. She claims that she never broke any of those laws set by her faith, and seems to harshly judge those who did and do. They say never to meet your heroes, and this book felt just like that. Kudos to it for making me feel that I did meet Ginger, but now I almost wish I hadn't. I don't suppose anybody's ever read this book, or probably none of you guys know Ginger too well or her career. You might have been somewhat aware, Alex, of Ginger's story and backstory, especially with her mother.
I didn't really know anything about her mother. I don't know her beyond just watching a bunch of her work.
Oh, really? What have you seen of her work?
We always had classic movies on at my house growing up, so I don't even remember the names of all of them. I just frequently remember seeing films of her.
A lot of the Fred and Ginger films are
yes, yeah,
most known for, which that just scraped the surface of what she could do. She was second fiddle in a lot of those films, but she won an Oscar in 1940, and Fred Astaire didn't really come close. Zach, what do you think about what I said or about Ginger in general?
I don't really know much of her work as much as I have a love for like older films and whatnot. There's a lot out there that I haven't seen. First thought, she probably wouldn't listen to this right now.
Yeah, she would not enjoy us drinking during this telecast for sure.
Do you think that she would find the internet to be devilry?
I don't know. Like, I don't think so.
Did she ever appear in television?
Oh, sure. Yeah, she had a variety.
Okay, so I was going to say, like, Jack Warner for a while had just like a apocalyptic fear of television. Wouldn't let them appear in Warner Brothers films.
She loved acting, and she seemed to embrace new technology as it came along. So any chance she got to do stuff, I mean, I think she took it. And she went back to the stage late in her career. Famously, Alex, I think you'll appreciate about her mother. Her mother testified for the House of Un-American Activities, and Ginger almost suggests that she was right to do so, like in a very tone-deaf kind of way.
Sounds like she was pretty indoctrinated.
Which is what I find fascinating, which is why I felt like the book was so limiting, because it didn't break out of that sort of tunnel vision.
So many of her films were just based on pure spectacle and formula, and it just came down to the charisma of the performers as opposed to the content of the screenplays.
Right, and she had very little ever to do with the actual content creation. You know, for movies that do rely on charisma as much as they do, to your point, Alex, and Ginger has that in spades.
Absolutely,
and so that really leads to her, years and years of great success, and of course, won Oscar win for the film Kitty Foyle in 1940, written by Dalton Trumbo. All right, guys, that's my book review. Anything else you want to say about that before we move on to the next segment?
If you could recommend 3 Ginger movies to anybody, what would they be?
Can we table that?
Because I know with you that's a big question.
It's not. I have an answer, but it actually ties into a later segment. Let's ask that at the end, because I'm going to tie it all together. So all right, cool. So let's move on to the next segment. I don't remember what it is. Oh, it is. It's our second run. Alex is going to take things over for a second. Let me explain the second run real quick before I hand things over. So if a film comes up on the show in some capacity, either in a finale episode or a top 5 or what have you, and one person on the show hasn't seen it, they have the opportunity to come back and review the film in what we call a second run. Tonight's film has come up twice in the show before. Episode 11.1, which it was my number 1 on my top 5 Disney live-action films of all time, and episode 50.4, in which was number 2 in my top 5 sports biopics of all time. And that's the episode Alex was on, and he chose to review that movie for tonight's second run. The movie is Gavin O'Connor's Miracle from 2004. However, when I looked back at the episode and mentioned Miracle, Alex said that he did see it, but it turns out maybe not so much.
I had not. In 2004, I was seeing a lot of movies, doing a lot of political activism in D.C., and watching a lot of hockey. So it seemed like I would have seen this movie. I realized I had not.
So it is a true second
run. Great opportunity to watch it now.
He hadn't seen it before. I mentioned it twice in the show, and now he went back and seen it. That turn over to Alex. How'd you feel about Miracle?
So I thought this was a interesting reimagining of what it was like to live under the Reagan regime in the 80s, from the perspective of this film being made at a time when American militarism was ramping up in Afghanistan and Iraq under Bush Jr. And this film felt very much made in opposition to that.
Reagan had not been elected yet. If the Olympics were in February of 1980, which I believe they were, he would have been elected 9 months later. So I guess
rather than saying Reagan regime, just what America's cultural climate was at the time.
Fair enough.
The opening sequence really caught me. It was an interesting piece of editing. I found it was very focused on just what's happening in America, and there was no discussion of what's happening in the USSR to parallel it. There's no discussion of what's happening in the world environmentally, politically, or culturally. All those things are ignored, and everything is shown as purely economical, which is largely what I would say Disney's outlook could be in a lot of their studios' work, of just rich versus poor and simplifying things to that. beyond any other cultural concerns.
I actually think it worked from a story point of view in the sense that it sort of suggested where a lot of these players were from a socioeconomic point of view. The players that would
I see your point with that, and I'll agree.
Wind up being on the team. So, like, there might have been external factors that led to that, but
I think it was intentional to make you see that these people are from different parts of North America, but they're coming together to play on this team.
Right.
They're all up against the same economic forces as each other.
Right.
So it's that shared objective. I enjoyed Noah Emmerich's performance. I feel like he always does a good job as the best friend character. I've been enjoying seeing him on The Americans. Editor John Gilroy's work. It's interesting seeing the different projects he's chosen. He was also the editor on Rogue One, Nightcrawler, Pacific Rim, and Warrior.
Warrior also directed by Gavin O'Connor.
Yeah, so it seems like they have a very good working relationship for that kind of sports movie, like rivalry from a singular perspective. Production design was done by John Willett, who was the art director on another one of our films from 1988, Mississippi Burger, and another film we watched at CMS, The Firm.
That was an Oscar movie marathon, not official CMS.
Okay. The second unit director worked within the stunt department on I Am Legend, Green Hornet, Die Another Day, and Jack Ryan, and I thought the way they did non-combat stunts to create these hockey games was really, really well done in the film and felt authentic to the game.
Overall, though, did you enjoy the film?
I did. I really enjoyed it and liked them going into the story. I would feel manipulated by the way they were trying to tell me the story, but in the way it ties together around just the main character, it felt organic unto itself. I didn't like the way that they depicted the non-American hockey players and dehumanized them. And I thought that really took out what the entire spirit of the Olympic Games is about. I loved the supporting character of the goalie, and in all of the game sequences, it was shot from behind him, and it was portraying his mask as a shield. It was shot in a way where the net felt like a cage to the opponent's goalie, but it felt like a thing he was protecting on his side. Great job with the cinematography
and the blocking camera from Gavin O'Connor in general. Yeah, no, for sure. As to the Soviet Union, whilst I see your point, I mean, I think that there's a couple things there. One, it's true to how Americans at the time certainly felt about the Soviet Union, right or wrong. Like, it sort of seemed to echo that culture of fear of the unknown and fear of this big red machine kind of thing. So it seemed to come from that perspective. And also, I was surprised by the few moments of humanity, and it wasn't necessarily good humanity, but it was humanity that we did get, particularly from the Russian coach. There was some back and forth between Kurt Russell and the Russian coach, in which Kurt Russell noted the arrogance of the coach when they pulled the goalie for just letting up a couple goals. And then also at the end, almost like respect, mutual respect, they looked at each other at the end. I was surprised by those moments.
What it bothered me was that it was a sports movie that felt focused on the reason this story matters is because they won, not because they learned to play together.
I don't think that's necessarily true. They happened to win, but it's very possible that they wouldn't have. I mean, I think that's what maybe makes people want to go see it. I think the story would have been just as valid had they not. Zach, I don't suppose you've seen Miracle?
I think that's one of those movies that they showed us in high school when they had nothing else to do.
Which wasn't that long ago for you.
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago. It was a very sports-centric high school. So they're like, well, whatever, just watch Miracle. But I really don't remember it very well.
That doesn't bode well. And it seems like Alex's issues are more about the external factors surrounding the movie.
Well, I saw the psychology of the psychology of how the technical processes were accomplished, like what they were in service of.
Which is what?
I think saying that exceptionalism is what makes a person acceptable. Kurt Russell's bad behavior and like neglect towards his marriage, that's something he had to do because otherwise how could he have won? Even though the film does finish with him getting along with his wife better, but it still shows that as, oh, that's part of what you got to do.
And I don't even think that was about exceptionalism. I think that was about an empty part of himself. I mean, that was his personal journey, dealing with his past and how he, failed to do something, in 1960 that he was, that bothered him for the rest of his life. It's something he became sort of obsessed with. And that was his personal albatross, if you will, that he needed to overcome. And that one wasn't necessarily about exceptionalism. And I think the film does suggest that it's not okay that he ignored his wife. Otherwise, I don't think they would have addressed it at all. I mean, I think it's suggested that his laser focus had the potential to interfere with his life, and at what price is glory? I think it wrestled with that question. I mean, for me, I think it's a great film because I think it's a rare sports movie that earns both its cheers and its tears. And I think it takes really great storytelling to do that. I mean, I think that I at the time in 2004, I named Kurt Russell the best actor of the year for the film because I actually think he gives a tremendous performance. It's not just an impression. I think he embodies Herb Brooks with a laser focus that leaves me forgetting that I'm watching Kurt Russell. I don't think he just gives memorable locker room speeches. He also plays the past of a man with an unfulfilled destiny. And as far as Gavin O'Connor's concerned, I think his direction keeps this film just on the proper side of the line, narrowly avoiding being trite. And as you mentioned, Alex, I think the hockey action is outstanding, very well shot and edited, effective, exciting, and always feeling real. And I was always also impressed with how well the lesser known or unknown actors were that played the players. And O'Connor, I think, deserves a lot of credit for that. He cast some hockey players who can act and some actors who could play a little hockey, and I don't think you could tell the difference. I also like the screenplay structure, which depicted the arc of the team instead of just the arc of a particular character, though it does detail some of the hardships and obstacles of several different characters, including Herb Brooks. And I think in that sense, it's a good example of a script that balances plot and character in a meaningful way. And I will give you that it's not a nuanced film, and maybe this is one of the things that you were pointing to. It makes its points on the nose, but I was invested regardless. And instead of it being about exceptionalism, I find this is a film about fortitude. Now, a lot of things had to go right for the Americans to pull this off. Home ice advantage, the arrogance of the Russians. I think if they hadn't pulled the goalie the way that they did, they might not have won, and that's just what happened in reality. But they also, as a team, worked really hard, prepared, and did not give up in spite of the adversity. It's that kind of attitude that puts the three of us that are on this panel, we are on this quixotic quest in this industry. Many think that we ought to give up, but we push forward against all odds, and this film shows us that sometimes that pays off, and when it does, there's nothing sweeter. That's what I see, Miracle.
What I think I wanted to see was that there were a bunch of other NHL legends playing against them in this film that are essentially extras in the way that they were presented here. For me, part of what I've always connected with being a big hockey fan is that anywhere I go in the world where they have a hockey team or people are passionate about it, politics, culture, religion, all that stuff doesn't matter. It comes down to how do we connect about this game? What do we appreciate about the craft of how this person plays it? And I've seen this with all sports things, and I think there could have been some great moments about how that tension and being on the brink of war, how bad of a place that was for both the Soviet and American governments to be, and if they showed any camaraderie between the American players and the Soviet players or Swedish or Norwegian or Czech players.
Well, I mean, I think there was some camaraderie with some of the other countries, but the fact of the matter was, I mean, they were telling a true story, and I'm not sure that there was truly any sort of relationship between the American players and the Russian players. They were afraid of each other in many cases.
Well, I would have liked to have seen that fear then.
Well, I mean, I think you saw it on the American side. I think your point is you didn't see anything from the Russian side. Mm-hmm. And my concern from a screenplay point of view is the potential that would be too unwieldy. I've always liked the idea of a sports story that tells both sides and that somehow meet at the end, and you don't necessarily know who you're rooting for or have some sympathy both ways. That's interesting to me, but I also don't know that this was the right movie for that.
I would just love to see Heat as a hockey movie.
I don't remember. Did you acknowledge that comment I made about the back and forth between Russell and the Russian coach? I feel like that humanized at least the coach a little bit.
Yeah, I thought that was a nice moment. I guess I just wanted more of it. It's something that I kept being eager for as I was watching, and it was getting into the world of the film and that point in history. I was well, that's the question I want answered. And it's very specific to me as an audience member.
I appreciate you acknowledging that.
I mean, I'm watching the movie for me, so... You're
the only audience member that you can respond for sure. I'm sorry that it disappointed you in that way. Would you say that the number one thing you do differently with the film is, from a screenplay structure point of view, is just, show more of the Russian side of things?
Yes, and I would also show... I think the bigger complaint than that was not showing the ugly side of what the Olympics do as this temporary pop-up consumer village.
I think it's a whole different movie, Alex. I think as a screenplay, I think you'd find yourself weighed down in that. If you turned in that draft to me, I would, and I think ultimately you would agree, to stay more focused on the character. That external Olympic stuff had nothing to do with the arc of the team or any individual player.
It has everything to do with it. It created the premise.
I don't think so. Most of this takes place outside of the Olympics in the months leading up to it.
Yeah, but if the Olympics didn't exist and nobody cared about them, then these bad things wouldn't have happened.
What bad things are you talking about?
The horrible police crackdown on impoverished populations everywhere the Olympics go, as well as everywhere FIFA goes.
Right. I think that's a movie about the creation of the Olympics, and that might be interesting in and of itself. but don't you see that that might be a sidetrack when you're telling a story about an individual team? They weren't involved in the creating the Olympics. They certainly, these characters weren't involved in deportation.
I see your point. I care more about that story than I do the story of the gold medalists.
I understand that, but if you were a director for hire, which I mean, like, I think we wouldn't mind being, and you were handed this script.
To me, I would say subjectivity begins at the point at which you choose a story and you choose who the main character of that story is. And that is done in development, not even in the screenwriting process or in the directing process. So by the time it got to the writer and the director, the decision, this is a story about the character Kurt Russell's playing and these select players, that is then given as like a project brief to the writer, who then writes what he is paid to write.
I had it as number 1 on my Disney live action films of all time and number 2 on my sports biopics of all time. Now that you've seen it, how do you respond to those two claims?
I think it's one of the better American sports movies I've seen. I think Goon is a better movie.
Okay, wow. I did not feel good about Goon.
I just felt like it was a more true hockey story.
True how?
It just felt like what being a hockey player in that situation is like.
You have to admit Goon was a little heightened for comic reasons. Like the tone was a little bit silly. Zach?
In general, I'm not really a sports guy in terms of like, I don't really participate in watching a lot of it, but over the years I've kind of gained an appreciation for just being able to enjoy it for whatever it is, and I can see the appeal. So, you know, that being said, like actually watching sports movies is really interesting for me. Goon's on my list, so that kind of makes me want to watch it more.
So now you've got Goon and Miracle on your list here.
Yeah.
I recommend them both. I enjoyed Miracle. I'm just.
I mean, I know. I know
my
that you did. I know that you did. You just hate the producers, which is fine. I hate most producers.
I'm sure the director did too.
Yeah, that exactly. And on that note, let's. You guys ready to move on to the final segment of the evening?
Yeah.
All right. I'm very excited with this. And Alex assigned it. It's time for our top 5, and tonight it's the top 5 Billy Wilder movies as assigned by Alex and inspired by our review last episode of the film Double Indemnity, which is celebrating its 75th anniversary this year. Billy Wilder is a 2-time Best Director winner. He won in 1945 for The Lost Weekend and in 1960 for The Apartment. He's one of the master storytellers that could do drama and comedy, and also one of the few that could balance the two easily. When he did do comedies, and some say he did the best ever, many of his films show what comic timing is all about. I've seen most of his 26 films that are available, and watched a few more that I'm missing in preparation for tonight. And 3 of them are on my top 100 list of all time, and you'll see what those are shortly. Guys, are you excited and ready for the Billy Wilder top 5?
Sure.
Edge of my seat.
You assigned it. I hope you're in the edge of your seat.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear.
Cool. All right. Well, I'm excited to tell you. And of course, just this is my personal top 5. So does not necessarily reflect what the rest of the world thinks, what's on the AFI list, etc. This is all what my personal feelings, the way that Alex expressed his personal feelings about Miracle. I'm going to start my number 5 with what I consider to be the least Wilder-esque film that he's done, although it's extremely well told. Based on a play by Agatha Christie, Witness for the Prosecution is one of the best courtroom dramas ever put on film. Charles Laughton deservedly got a Best Actor nomination for his role for the film in 1957 as the lead barrister and de facto detective. It's been a while since I've seen it, but I remember it being very smart, very taut, very well acted, and highly engaging. It's a really good, complex mystery that unfolds more naturally than a lot of other Christie pieces like Murder on the Orient Express. I think it's the film's Britishness that makes it feel less Wilder somehow. But it still has this trademark precision in direction, wry sense of humor, and keen storytelling ability. Guys, number 5 is Witness for the Prosecution from 1957. Does either of you know that film?
Mm-mm.
Some people forget that it was Wilder, actually. Alex, you're the Wilder expert. Do you know that film?
I'm not an expert. I just enjoy his work.
Do you know Witness for the Prosecution?
I have not seen that one, but I'd like to see it now that you described it.
Yeah, more second runs coming up for 2020. All right, moving on to number 4. You guys ready? All right, number 4 is the film we just discussed in the last episode, so I won't get too much into it. Double Indemnity is my number 4, Wilder's 3rd film, and by this film, he's already a master. Double Indemnity is an early noir that's detailed, funny, dark, sexy, captivating, with great performances all around, including one by Edward G. Robinson that should have been nominated for an Oscar. Wilder co-wrote the script with Raymond Chandler, and it's terrific. Chandler added all the details of the mystery, while Wilder added the crackling, very memorable dialogue. We went over it thoroughly in episode 59.3 just a few days ago, so no need for great detail here. It's a terrific film and just narrowly missed my top 100 of all time. A lot of people consider it one of the best films of all time. It's on my number 4 Wilder list here. I believe you guys have seen, or at least Alex, I think you've seen Double Indemnity.
Yeah, I think it's a great, chilling black comedy film.
Cool. Zach, any chance?
No, but it's also on my list, and now this really makes me want to watch it. I mean, I'm into noir and like the kind of hard-boiled detective sort of things, and yeah, it sounds awesome.
There's no official hard-boiled detective. He's an insurance man.
He thinks of himself as one and inserts himself into the world as one.
He inserts himself as actually a murderer, as it turns out.
Yeah. If Raymond Chandler helped write it, right? I mean, are there Venetian blinds?
I think there are. I'm not giving it away, Zach. He talks about it in the very first minute or two. Like what we talked about in the last episode is how kind of amazing. It's one of those movies that tell you the end right in the very beginning. What makes the movie fascinating is about the how it all transpires.
Cool.
And not what happens. So that's what's great about Double Indemnity. And that's a trick that he used again in Sunset Boulevard in 1950, telling you the end up front. All right, ready to move on to number 3?
All right.
Very exciting. All right, now we're getting to films that are on my top 100 list of all time. And it's fun how circular this show can become, because my number 3 is directly related to the book review that I started the evening with. It's the film that I named as the best film of 1942. Ladies and gentlemen, Billy Wilder's first film as a director, The Major and the Minor, starring Ginger Rogers in a tour de force performance. I think it's one of the sharpest and most inventive comedies I've ever seen. For those of you who don't know, the basic plot is Ginger is a 26-year-old girl who can't afford a train ticket home and has to pose as a 13-year-old girl in order to get the half fare in order to get home. And then she winds up in a boys' military academy posing as a 13-year-old girl, and hijinks ensue in a film that only Billy Wilder could have pulled off. In its own way, it pokes fun at gender politics, sexuality, and generational differences while never slowing down so that you notice it right away. The result is a film that's breezy, fun, witty, intelligent, and as I mentioned earlier, one of my all-time favorites, the best film of 1942, and one of the most fun. We talked about it a lot in the 1942 interview. You guys weren't on that show. Zach, I doubt you've seen The Major and the Minor.
Nope.
Possibly you have, Alex. Billy Wilder's first film as a director?
No, but it sounds really funny.
If you do not have respect for Ginger Rogers now, you will after this film. It's an amazing.
I like her work.
I was talking to you. That wasn't directly.
Not everything's about me.
He was the general you.
Not everything is about you. And that's why I wanted to hold back my top Ginger Rogers films. This is number 1 on my Ginger Rogers list.
Did you wish that you went to that military boarding school?
Not after reading her biography, I'll tell you.
Give you a whole other tint to that?
Yeah. So more films to add to your list, Zach.
It's growing.
The list is growing. Did my plot description excite you?
You're very descriptive, man. It does something for me, for sure.
Let's leave it at that.
Yeah.
Are you guys ready for number 2?
Sure.
We're also on audio podcasts. You're on audio.
Yes, we're ready.
Here. I need some audio.
We're on the edge of our seats.
Dead air. I want verbal confirmations. All right, number 2 was on my number 1 film on a previous top 5 in episode 37.4. It was my number 1 film with top 5 films with unlikable protagonists. And Billy Wilder has a dark side. We talked about Double Indemnity already, and this is him as most cynical. His brutal masterpiece. Film is called Ace in the Hole from 1951, sometimes called The Big Circus. In the film, Kirk Douglas is a reporter. Chuck Tatum is his name, a former big city reporter who fell out of favor, had to take up residence on a small Albuquerque newspaper. He stumbles across a man trapped in a cave and then subtly conspires to keep the man in the cave while he builds up the story into a national news event. It's vicious, cynical, harrowing satire of our media and our own interest in Schadenfreude that will leave you feeling dirty inside after you see it in the best possible way. It is an amazing film that doesn't get talked about nearly enough. Billy Wilder's Ace in the Hole, guys.
It reminds me of Nightcrawler from how you described it.
And I think the director, Dan Gilroy, I was going to say Tony, that's his brother, Dan Gilroy would probably tell you that he was inspired by Ace in the Hole. Any chance you've seen it, Zach?
Yeah, I got one. Yes, I have seen this a long time ago. It's been a while, but I just remember seeing it and feeling like, it's still really relevant. And I think that was the reason why we watched it. I don't have a whole lot of notes, but if you let me get in my laptop, I swear I have a paper on it somewhere.
I don't know if we've got time for that now.
I know.
You can do a vlog reading your paper to the audience at some point.
Got to do something with all those papers, man.
And they got to come in handy somewhere. Da-da-da. It's time for number one. You guys ready for number one?
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. Zach,
copy that.
There we go. There's only one slot left, and still a lot of big films, very famous films, still unsaid. So there's going to be some controversy here. My number one on tonight's list is at number 25 on my all-time list, and is one of the Best Picture winners I mentioned earlier. It came up on the show this year in a classic movie showdown with Faces, which I think was episode 57.3. And I'm talking, of course, about The Apartment from 1960. It is the greatest blend of comedy and drama, movie-wise, that I've seen, and that's a joke for those of you that have seen the film. Jack Lemmon and Shirley MacLaine are outstanding. Their chemistry and scene work are magical. In spite of its lighthearted tone, the film winds up being a powerful exploration of modern-day relationships in the late 50s, early 60s, corporate America, and depression, and I think only Billy Wilder could have pulled it off. It's a masterpiece in my mind, one of my favorites of all time, and hence number one on my list of Billy Wilder films. I'm going to assume that you've seen The Apartment, Alex.
I have, but it's been a while. I remember being compelled by it, but I don't remember any specifics.
Okay, that's something. Zach, The Apartment, it's a big one. Best Picture 1960?
Nope.
All right. So I guess the question that...
What does the Academy know?
Well, they knew something right in 1960 because it's a small film, so it was actually a surprising Best Picture winner. The Best Picture in the year before was Ben-Hur, which of course we're going to talk about a lot in our 1959 review. So if we go from Ben-Hur to a little like apartment drama, like comedy drama, like the Apartment was kind of a big leap and a surprise in that sense. But it was the right move because it's really like a beautiful, beautiful film. So I guess the question, Alex, you assign the top five. What you've seen two of the five. What am I missing based on what you've seen?
He did Some Like It Hot, right?
That's the big one that is not on here. I'm not even sure it would be 6. It'd probably be 7. It's part of our 1959 review, so of course I'm going to talk about it a lot with Patrick and James in February. I appreciate Some Like It Hot. It was number one on AFI's best comedies of all time. It was the number one film, and so might be generally considered to be his greatest film of all time. I like it, but I don't love it like I like those other films.
Well, I enjoyed that one a lot, and so I feel like if you enjoyed these other ones even more, I definitely have to check them out.
Having seen The Apartment and Double Indemnity, would you rank Someone Like It Hot ahead of those?
If it's in the context of which do I think is a more transformative film to the medium, I would say Double Indemnity, but that's more for its historical context rather than its like intent. But as far as like I want to put a movie on to like have a good time watching with someone, I'd rather watch Some Like It Hot
than The Apartment.
I don't remember The Apartment well enough to have that opinion.
Zach, are there other Billy Wilder films that you're aware of that you're surprised I didn't mention?
No. Ace in the Hole is the only one, and then Some Like It Hot's on my list for the reasons that you mentioned. And then I really want to go see Double Indemnity now.
The other big one, the most famous one that I also don't love, and I actually feel like is a bit overrated, is Sunset Boulevard. That's one that I'm aware that people, when they see this list, they're going to be like, WTF. We haven't done a review on the show. I went to see it at TCM Fest a couple years ago. I appreciate a lot about it. What's that?
So it's a great gateway movie.
What do you mean by that?
A film to get somebody excited about checking out more classic films.
Because it's accessible to a modern day audience, but still, yeah. Okay. I actually think it's a lot slower than a lot of his other films. It's a good movie. I'd say it's not a great movie, but I'm preparing for the onslaught that I'm going to get from the internet world, the Twitter and Instagram world, by leaving out Sunset Boulevard. I mean, there's another film that I was thinking about that I like ahead of both Some Like It Hot and Sunset Boulevard is a farcical comedy did in 1961, I think. It was called 1, 2, 3. Do you guys know 1, 2, 3 with James Cagney?
No.
It's kind of a fun little story about James Cagney plays the guy who runs the Coca-Cola plant in Germany. It's another little Cold War kind of fun thing. The East German Berlins, the communist Germans, trying to steal the Coca-Cola formula from James Cagney.
Oh.
That's the plot of the movie. And
So he's become the reverse of the Public Enemy now.
Absolutely, absolutely. And he's actually really funny in the movie, James Cagney. And there's a lot of like no coward, like in one door out the other, and Keystone cars chases. I mean, Billy Wilder has a lot of fun with it. All right, guys, that's my top 5. Anything else before we close things out?
Yeah, I actually have a question for Alex, just because I think it's really funny. Can you name 3 other Gateway movies?
I can name one. Go ahead, Alex.
I mean, ideally, I'd want 5 from you guys,
Okay.
but
So I would say Casablanca for sure, Wizard of Oz, Robin Hood.
Talking about 1936 Robin Hood with Errol Flynn.
no, he means Men in Tights.
No, he does not.
Also that one. Alexander Nevsky by Sergei Eisenstein.
I don't know if that's going to be a Gateway movie. It's great
inspiration for The Empire Strikes Back.
I understand. I don't think a lot of audiences would respond to it. And that's a film I think you build up to. It's funny because whenever I'm starting to date someone new and I feel like I need to ease them into classic movies, I will often start with The Apartment. So it's funny that you asked that. And another one that I'll start with is Rear Window. I would also call it Gateway.
Yeah, that's a
one.
good way.
Well, I mean, I think what's good about Rear Window is it's very accessible to modern audiences, but at the same time, it's got so much cinema going on. Like it deals with a lot of like the things that make cinema great. And then for all its complications, Citizen Kane actually still holds up to a lot of audiences and does so many cool things that I think it gets audiences interested in cool things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's fair.
I would usually show The Apartment, Rear Window, and then Citizen Kane, building up to that. So by the time they're at Citizen Kane, they're aware of film technique and then aware of how Wells is using it in Citizen Kane, and that makes them excited about film technique a little more. That's what my feelings on Gateway films. We've a whole new term here. All right, closing thoughts. Alex, anything?
I think we need to be careful when celebrating the Olympics. We have the Olympics coming here to LA soon, and I saw the whole homeless population of Calgary when they had the Olympics. Their mayor put all of those people on a bus and sent them to Vancouver. When the Olympics came to Vancouver in 2010, the mayor at the time sent them all into like a tent city, like apartheid shanty town in East Vancouver, and it was just drowned in heroin. There were people fighting the cops every day during the games and things that were not shown on television at all. So that kind of colors my perspective of them coming in a movie celebrating them as the measure of achievement.
I don't know if Miracle celebrates them as the measure of achievement. It was just, I'm
saying what the Olympics mean to me, to give more context to my analysis.
Okay, cool. And again, he reviewed the film Miracle tonight from 2004, so that's where that's coming from. Zach, closing thoughts.
I have a lot of movies to catch up on.
Once you do catch up on them, that's when you bring it back for a second run on the sound off, like Alex did with Miracle tonight. Yeah. So you
all right, Double Indemnity, man. I'll do it.
And then after you watch the movie, you need to watch our review on it that we just did that came out just this past Thursday.
Cool.
How many of our shows have you watched in the past, Zach?
I gotta go.
I think I'm at like 15.
Oh, look at you. Gold star for Alex. And have you been on all 15 of those shows that you watched?
I have not.
Oh, okay. Your favorite, though, is the 1988 review, right? That's everybody's favorite.
Yeah, it was the most fun to make.
Yeah. All right, guys. So this concludes, believe it or not, our 5th season. This episode is the end of our 5th season, and of our regular season anyway. And next up is our finale episodes, which airs Oscar week, starting on February 4th, 2020, with our top 10 of 2019. That'll feature Alex right here, and Jim will give you our top 10 films of 2019. And on Wednesday, February 5th, 2020, Devin and George will be here for the Oscar preview, in which we're going to tell you who will win in each of the categories, in 9 of the categories, I believe, and who should win and who should have been nominated. And then on Thursday, February 6th, 2020, our big episode of the year, looking back at a whole year in review. This year it's 1959 in review. It'll be me, James Monaghan, and Patrick Taylor, and that will be on Thursday, February 6th, 2020. I'm very excited about all those episodes. I think even Zach and Alex are excited too.
So excited.
In the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, this meeting of the No Name Cinema Society is adjourned.